Yesterday there was a big ol' anniversary. Unfortunately, it was for one of the most genocidal and downright evil organizations in the entire world. Yes, yesterday, July 1st, was the 100th anniversary of the forming of the Chinese Communist Party. Yes, over 100 million people are dead. Who knows what the death toll is going to be when it's all said and done, but the Epoch Times, the reason why I'm such a big proponent of their website is because they do excellent pieces like this. It's just going to be one article right here because they hit all of the big high points of the degeneracy and, yeah, like I said, downright evilness of the CCP condensed into this one article. We're not going to read everything, but it could be a fairly long video as well, mostly because, yeah, we need to highlight and just go out there and show you that everything that we're sort of inching towards in the Western world, if left unchecked, could very well just lead us to a society such as this, and it's nothing that you want, okay? So, let's take a look. Founded in July of 1921, the Chinese Communist Party has wreaked death and destruction on the Chinese populace for a century, armed with the Marxist ideology of struggle as its guiding principle, which led to a whole bunch of struggle sessions, which I'm sure we're going to be getting into. The CCP has launched scores of movements targeting a long list of enemy groups, spies, landlords, intellectuals, disloyal officials, pro-democracy students, religious believers, and ethnic minorities. Yep. Oh, no, it just started out like every other classic Marxist struggle. Oh, we just need to go after those evil proletariat and that entire working class, all of those bourgeoisie. Rather flip reverse that. See, I'm not very versed in communism lingo. Yeah, the bourgeoisie, oh yeah, they're out there. Oh yeah, they're here to oppress you. And us proletariat, we need to rise up and band together. Until we start to take a look at all of the proletariat and then just start picking them off by different ideological immutable characteristic divides that we can create out there. But yeah, oh no, and before we decide which ones we're going to start systematically killing off, we're just going to go ahead and lump everybody into specific groups. Like, okay, all of the Jews are over there, all the blacks are over there, the Asians are right there, oh, and the Islamists are over there, and yeah, you guys all hate each other for different reasons. So yeah, you just go ahead and you continue to war that class struggle, and us here up at the top, up here in the Politburo, yeah, we'll just make sure that your entire life is perfectly taken care of you, or taken care for you, because you're too stupid to do it on yourself. That's their opinion. I hate it all. Which, with each campaign, the party's purported goal has been to create communist heaven on earth. How would you define that? How would you possibly achieve that? Oh, you can't define it and you can't achieve it. Therefore, we need to continue to strive towards it. Fucking stupid. But time and time again, the results have been the same: mass suffering and death. Meanwhile, the few elite CCP officials and their families have accumulated incredible power and wealth. Same thing that happened in the Soviet Union, the same thing that happened in Venezuela, okay? How many people have starved to death? How many first-hand accounts of actual media sources that go down there that show the starving populace, people that have had to eat their household pets, that have had to chase down rats in the street in order to get any form of sustenance? Meanwhile, Maduro's putting on another fucking 20 pounds. Oh, it's just quarantine weight, of course. More than 70 years of party rule has resulted in the killing of tens of millions of people of Chinese people, and the dismantling of the 5,000-year-old civilization. Yeah, I can't speak specifically because I'm not too well versed in all of Chinese history. The CCP is up there when it comes to raw numbers of genocide, but the most tyrannical rule in Chinese history, it's tough to say. It's tough to say. They're up there, though. I'm not going to give them any less credit than they've worked so desperately hard to achieve. I just can't speak about old emperors of yore. While China has advanced economically in recent decades, the CCP retains its nature as a Marxist-Leninist regime bent on solidifying its grip on China and the world. Millions of religious believers, ethnic minorities, and dissidents are violently repressed today. Below is a summary, and we shall get into it. Anti-Bolshevik League incident. This is the inciting incident, the initial flashpoint. Less than a decade after the party's founding, Mao Zedong, the world's largest murderer, but I'm sure we'll get to that, then the head of the communist-centric controlled territory in southeast China's Jiangxi province, launched a political purge of his rivals known as the Anti-Bolshevik League incident. Mao accused his rivals of working with the Anti-Bolshevik League and the intelligence agency in the Kuomintang, which was Chinese ruling party at the time. This resulted in thousands of Red Army personnel and party members were killed in the purge. The one-year-long campaign that started in the summer of 1930 marked the first in a series of movements held by the paranoid leader that only grew bloodier and broader with time. The mass carnage lasted until Mao's death, thankfully, in 1976. While there's no record showing exactly how many CCP members were killed during the campaign, Chinese historian Go Hao, sure, wrote in a 1999 article that within a month, 4,400 to 40,000, those are big old fucking bars of error there, Red Army members had been killed, including dozens of military leaders. Within a few months, the CCP committee in southwestern Jiangxi had killed more than 1,000 of its non-military members. Oh, cool, so it wasn't even just the people engaged in the war. It was everybody gets to be involved in communism and the suffering that it incites. Terrific. At the end of the movement, the Jiangxi CCP committee reported that 80 to 90% of CCP officials in the region had been accused of being spies and executed. That's weird. That doesn't happen in every single communist regime. Go ahead and accuse somebody who you don't like, and then guess what? Oh, wow. Their government home is suddenly empty. That's weird. Oh, and all their family's dead. That sure is efficient. Family members of senior officials were also persecuted and killed, the report said. The torture methods inflicted on CCP members, according to Guo, included burning their skin, cutting off female breasts, and pushing bamboo sticks underneath fingernails. How fun. Now, if you just say that that's a kink, you can go ahead and get a parade for it. After becoming party leader, Mao kickstarted the Rectification Movement, the first ideological mass movement of the CCP in 1942. From the CCP's base in the secluded mountain range of the Yan'an, in the northwestern Shanxi province. They all sound the same, but that could also just be different translation from Mandarin, of course. Mao and his loyalists employed the familiar tactics of accusing his rivals of being spies in order to purge senior officials and other party members. All told, about 10,000 CCP members were killed, but they were all spies, so it doesn't matter. Everyone became a spy in Yan'an. From middle school students to primary school students, oh my god, 12-year-olds, 11-year-olds, 10-year-olds, even 6-year-olds, spies was discovered. Oh, thank God the government got to the bottom of that spy problem. Who were they distributing their information to? They were spies, therefore they needed to be taken care of. The tragic fate to the family of Shi Bufo, a local painter, was recounted in Wei's book. In 1942, CCP officials suddenly accused Shi of being a spy and detained him. That night, Xi's wife, unable to cope with her husband's likely death sentence, took her own life and her 2 young children's. Oh, she handled that well, but hey, you're under communist rule. What real hope do you have? If you didn't take care of it yourself, somebody else would have done that for you, probably within the coming weeks. In October of 1949, the CCP took control of China, and Mao became the regime's first leader. God bless. Months later, the regime's first movement, named Land Reform, Mao mobilized the nation's poorest peasants to violently seize the land and other assets of those deemed landlords. There is the classic class struggle. Just go ahead and drum something up and blame it on somebody else, and then just hand them guns and point them in the right direction. Many of whom were just more well-off peasants. Millions died. Exactly. Same thing with the Soviets, right? You got the proletariat at the bottom, you got the bourgeoisie at the top, and then eventually when you start to kill off all the bourgeoisie, then you can just go after the kulaks, which are just more successful farmers. How do you quantify how successful they are? Do they have more than you? Kill them. Mao, in 1949, was accused of being a dictator and admitted to it. Oh, great. My dear sis, you are right. That is just what we are, he wrote, according to Chinophile, a magazine published by the Center on U.S.-China Relations at the Asia Society. According to Mao, communists in power should be dictatorial against running dogs of imperialism. Yeah, that sucks. The landlord class and bureaucratic bourgeoisie, there's that same old terminology, and reactionaries and their accomplices, who were associated with the opposition Kuomintang. Of course, the communists decided who would qualify as a running dog, a reactionary, or even a landlord, and perhaps a spy, you think? In the 2019 book, Bloody Red Land chronicles the story of Li Man, a surviving landlord in the southwest China or Chong. I know I'm butchering all these names, but the borders keep changing all the time within China, so don't need to be terribly specific. After the CCP came into power, officials claimed that Lee's family had stashed 1.5 metric tons of gold. Holy fuck. Fort Lee? I'm sure. But this wasn't true. I'm shocked, as the family had been bankrupted years earlier due to Lee's father's drug addiction. Oh, imagine that. Government set up opium dens, and then you can just go ahead and distract the peasants with just little reprieves of escapism, and then all of a sudden you can just start doing other stuff off to the side, and yep, doesn't remind you of anything else going on modern day now, does it? Having no gold to give to the CCP, Lee was tortured to the brink of death. Oh, how adorable. They didn't quite finish the job. They just wanted to leave him with a tortured body in a completely broken mental state. Terrific. They took off my clothes, tied my hands and feet to a pole, and then they tied a rope around my genitals and tied a stone to my feet. Once again, sounds very sexy, Lee recounted. He said that they hung the rope on a tree. Immediately, blood gushed from my belly button. Oof. Lee was ultimately saved by a CCP official who sent him to the home of a doctor of Chinese medicine. Rubbed some tiger liniment on it. Over the next few months, Lee's close relatives and extended family would be tortured to death one after another, because that's what always happens with communists, because, hey, they'll accuse you of being spies, and because you were a spy, guess what? Everybody else that you know, they were spies as well, and they got to get that information out of you somehow. Even if you don't have any, they'll just torture you for fun, because they need to refine their methods. The Great Leap Forward. I'm sure you guys have probably all at least heard the term, but do you know the devastation that it has caused? Because I wasn't taught it in school, and boy, do I ever wish I was, because what a horrific event, okay? You might have heard passing mentions of the Soviet gulags, but the Great Leap Forward, I don't think there's been a more bloody stretch of time in human history than this right here. Mao launched a Great Leap Forward in 1958, a 4-year campaign that sought to push the country to exponentially increase its steel production while collectivizing agricultural farming. The goal of Mao's slogan was to surpass Britain and catch up with America. They failed. But it wasn't from a lack of trying. Peasants were ordered to build backyard furnaces to make steel, leaving farmlands in severe neglect. Again, this is what happens with central planning. It could work in like Beijing, but then out in the countryside, yeah, no, that's pretty fucking stupid. Moreover, overzealous local officials who were afraid of being branded as laggards set unrealistically high harvest quotas. As a result, peasants had nothing left to eat after turning over the bulk of their crops as taxes. What ensued was one of the worst man-made disasters in history, the Great Famine, during which tens of millions died of starvation. From 59 to 61, starving peasants turned to wild animals, grass, bark, and even kaolinite, a clay mineral for food. Oh great. Extreme hunger also drove many to cannibalism. And that's why nobody really has a honest idea of how many people died, because a lot of people were consumed during this time. There are recorded cases of people eating the corpses of strangers, friends, and family members, and parents killing their children for food, and vice versa. Jasper Becker, who wrote the Great Leap Forward account, Hungry Ghosts, and the Chinese people who were forced to engage out of pure desperation in selling human flesh on the market, and the swapping of children so that they wouldn't eat their own. I said at the outset this wasn't going to be fun. Across 13 provinces, there were a total of 3,000 to 5,000 recorded cases of cannibalism. Becker noted that cannibalism in China in the late 50s and early 60s likely occurred on a scale unprecedented in the history of the 20th century. Chinese historian Yu Zhiguang in the 1980s found an archival photo from his hometown of Hunan province. It purportedly showed a man named Lu Jianyu standing beside his 1-year-old son, head and bones. Lu eventually was executed for murder. Uplifting story. As many as 45 million people died during the Great Leap Forward, according to historian Dideker, author of Mao's Great Famine. But don't worry, we're not done yet, because the Cultural Revolution followed. After the catastrophic catastrophic failure of the Great Leap Forward, Mao, feeling that he was losing grip on his power, launched the Cultural Revolution in 1966, an attempt to use the Chinese populace to reassert control over the CCP and country, creating a cult of personality. Mao aimed to crush those persons in authority who are taking the capitalist road and strengthen his own ideologies according to the early directive. Over 10 years of mandated chaos, millions were driven or killed or driven to suicide and state-sanctioned violence, while zealous young ideologues, the infamous Red Guards, traveled to the country destroying and denigrating China's traditions and heritage. Draw your own parallels. It was a whole of society endeavor, with the party encouraging people from all walks of life to snitch on co-workers, neighbors, friends, and even family members who were counter-revolutionaries, anyone with politically incorrect thoughts or behavior. It's so nice that they simplified this process now that you can just mass flag somebody for having wrongthink. Anyways, the victims, who included intellectuals, artists, CCP officials, and others deemed as class enemies or purporters and disseminators of disinformation. They were all subjugated as well, to ritual humiliation through struggle sessions. Remember when I said put a pin in that struggle that Mao was championing at the beginning of his regime? Yeah, well, here comes the fruition. Public meetings where victims were forced to admit their supposed crimes and endure physical and verbal abuse from the crowd before they were detained, tortured, and sent to the countryside for forced labor. Traditional Chinese culture and traditions were a target of Mao's campaign to exterminate the four olds: old custom, culture, habits, and ideas. As a result, countless cultural relics, temples, historical buildings, statues, and books were destroyed. Yeah, they didn't have any old films to go ahead and retell their story and rewrite them in order to be more inclusive and mindful of today's society. It's amazing what private business can get away with today in contrast. Zhang Jinji, an elite CCP member who worked for the Liaoyang provincial government, was among the victims of the campaign. According to an account reported by Chinese media after the Cultural Revolution, a colleague reported Zhang in 1968 after she commented to a co-worker that she couldn't understand some of the CCP's actions. Oh, I'm sure she died horrifically. The 38-year-old was detained at a local party cadre training center where more than 30,000 staff members of the provincial government were being held. While in detention, she refused to admit to doing anything wrong and stood by her political opinions. Oh boy, did she not kill herself? Let's see. She was firmly loyal to the party, but disagreed with some of Mao's policies. She was sent to prison. Oh boy. There, Zhang suffered horrendously as officials tried to force her to give up her viewpoints. Prison guards would use iron wire to keep her mouth open and push a dirty mop into it. Fun. They handcuffed her hands behind her back and hung a 40-pound block of iron from chains. Provincial CCP officials even ripped out her hair, and guards would often arrange for male prisoners to gang rape her. Communism at its best. Zhang attempted to commit suicide but failed, which caused prison officials to step up their control. Her husband was also forced to divorce her. By early 1975, Zhang had descended into madness. In April of that year, she was executed by firing squad. Before being shot, the prison guards cut her trachea to silence her. So it was just kind of a formality, and I guess they acted in compassion in her final moments by just not letting her bleed out, but instead, letting the bullet do it for her. Communism. During Zhang's detention, her husband and 2 young children were forced to renounce their relationship to her. Upon learning of her death, they didn't even dare cry for fear that they would be heard by neighbors who might report them for bearing resentment towards the party. I'm not saying that we're there. I'm not saying that we're close, but like I said, you can draw your own connections to cancel culture, critical race theory, all of this sort of institutionalized hatred of your brother. And why people don't know more about these topics is not so baffling if you think about it, but it should be a lot more readily available. The disastrous movement ended in October of 1976, less than a month after Mao's death. The legacy of the Cultural Revolution goes far beyond the lives it destroyed, according to Dick Otter. It is not so much death which characterizes the Cultural Revolution, it was trauma, he told NPR in 2016. That's a very big brain take that I actually don't disagree a whole lot with. It was the way in which people were pitted against each other, or obligated to denounce family members, colleagues, friends. It was about loss, and loss of trust, loss of friendship, faith in other human beings, predictability in social relationships, and it was really the mark that the Cultural Revolution left behind. Exactly, a subjugated populace that had no hope for the future, because you never knew when you woke up in the morning, if you did in fact wake up in the morning, what would be the verboten topic of the day. What would get you thrown in jail? Or how many more days free do you have before you get bamboo shoots stuck up your fingernails? But wait, there's more. This is something that I was actually taught in the schools. I don't remember if it was taught uncritically, but I seem to remember thinking that this is kind of stupid. And one of my at least memorable teachers, one of my 5th grade teachers, he at least did a good job describing to us how retarded this entire policy was. In 1979, the regime launched the one-child policy, which allowed married couples to have only one child, which is the lengths to which some people, some segment of the population, want the government to control your lives. Oh yeah, no. That same group that's like, oh yeah, no, we want taxpayer-funded abortions. We want abortions on demand. We want them around on every single corner because the government should look after all of our decisions. Well, that same government can tell you how much you're allowed to procreate. If you give them one aspect of your life, what makes you think that the government won't take and extrapolate that point even further? In a campaign ostensibly aimed at boosting the standard of living by curbing population growth, the policy caused widespread forced abortions, sterilizations, and infanticide. According to Chinese ministry, just so flows together, of health, data cited by Chinese state media, 336 million abortions were performed from 1971 to 2013. Yes, even this century it still continued on, and that's within 8 years. Yeah, it's only since been rescinded. Jia Runying, a villager from Jiangxi province who experienced forced sterilization, wrote a public letter in 2013 that her family requested to postpone the surgery because of her poor health. The local official, however, said that they would go and do the surgery even if she had to be tied up with ropes. All under the auspices of keeping the rest of society safe and secure. Oh, we don't want overpopulation. Oh, we're running out of resources. Okay, well, there's other things that the government could do. Nope, sterilize everyone. That'd be a great thing to do. Remember, this is the same party. This is still the same communist fucking party that's somehow going to bring apart the utopia by ripping out somebody's innards. The fuck are we doing? Well, it's not we, it's them. It's a very small group of them who are subjugating a whole bunch of people. She began to urinate blood and had headaches and stomach aches after the surgery. Yeah, because they probably took a fucking ice cream scooper to it. They weren't terribly concerned about her well-being beforehand. Do you think they would have been taking the proper precautions while doing it? The regime discontinued the one-child policy in 2013, allowing 2 children. Thank God. On May 31st, it announced that families could have 3 children. God bless. God bless. Imagine that, looking around and seeing, oh fuck, we have a very, very small population growth over past 40 years. We need to fix it very quickly. Allow people to procreate twice and then maybe 3 times. Of course, we recently covered Tiananmen Square. June 4th was the anniversary of that. There's a video up on the channel that goes over this, so I shan't tread a topic that we just recently covered because we got one more and this video is going to be long enough. And again, I need to bang on this topic though, okay? Because we just recently talked about that. And this right here leads into the current state of the CCP, genociding Muslims, okay? Normally, in the West, Muslims are just such a protected culture and a protected little species that the left likes to tote around as being prosecuted and, oh, there's just unfairly labeled as being terrorists and they can do no wrong, which is fucking stupid. But then you ask them about Uyghur Muslims or even the Falun Gong in China, and their lips are sealed. It's just such a fucking disconnect. It's like, okay, this is going to be not even remotely connected to China, but it does in a wider context, okay? The left, the authoritarians out there, they want to paint everybody that they don't like as a Nazi, right? Fair enough. We've all been privy to that information that anybody that the left disagrees with is by default a Nazi and white supremacist, whatever the fuck you want to call it. But we're going to focus in on the Nazi or the neo-Nazi. And what are the Nazis most famous for doing? Well, the Holocaust, of course, genociding all the Jews, 6 million of them. So they want to tell you that the annihilation of Jews is bad, which I totally agree with, and I like to be ideologically consistent on. But then when you talk about the conflict in the Middle East that runs through the current day right now, then you have that same group that partnered with the Nazis in the 40s, Palestine, and then you'll have all of those same people that like to paint people as Nazis go ahead and support the people who supported the Nazis, and then enforce their strict doctrine, at least according to Hamas, that they need to eradicate all the Jews. The cognitive dissonance of communists supporting leftists is fucking insane, and I just can't wrap my head around it unless you're just not being ideologically consistent, which I think at this point that's all we can really fall back on, because there's no consistency there whatsoever. Okay, either you think that we need to come together as a society and go ahead and adhere to all your rules, but everybody's unique and important and all of their viewpoints need to be heard just as long as it's their specific month, and that it's not all Muslims, and maybe they're actually just kind of tell us what they're thinking about behind the scenes, because yeah, not all Muslims, that's what they care about. Not all of them, not the Uyghur ones, no, they're different. But first and foremost, the precursor to that, a decade later, the regime decided to carry out another bloody suppression. On July 20th, 1999, the authorities began a wide campaign targeting the estimated 70 to 100 million practitioners of Falun Gong, a spiritual practice that includes meditative exercises and moral teachings centered around the values of truthfulness, compassion, and tolerance. That's why you can see why communists would be running afoul of them. According to the Falun Dafa Information Center, a website to the Falun Gong related information, millions of practitioners have been fired from their jobs, expelled from schools, jailed, tortured, or simply killed because they refuse to give up their belief. Exactly with whatever happens in any totalitarian regime, in any socialist regime, if we go ahead and extrapolate it out further. I'll bring up the example of the Nazis again, okay? What did they do? Because the Holocaust wasn't a thing that just happened overnight. It had to come in small increments, okay? It was demonize the Jews. Then it was don't support them at their business. And it's like, okay. And now they're posing a threat because they're not allowed to go back to their jobs, and then they're just poor. Okay, all of a sudden now they're a burden on society. Okay, what are you going to do with them if they're a burden on society? Okay, then you got to house them. Okay, and then you round up all of the military age men, and then you just take them and then you house them because they're going to be the biggest problem. Okay, well, if you take all the men out of society, then you got to take all the women and children out of it too, and then all of a sudden you just end up shooting somebody in the back of the head in an empty fucking stadium. One step at a time. These aren't slippery slope arguments. These are things that have happened before. These are things that have happened in every sort of socialist, totalitarian regime that's out there. Regardless if you want to call the Nazis, oh, they're far right. Just break down the name. It tells you right there. Nationalist Socialist Workers' Party of Germany. It's right there. It's right there. Many people out there have already broken down that Nazis are socialists. I'm just one of the latest people to do a very generalized take on this, and perhaps it's a topic that needs further elaboration in the future, but this video is already going to be 30 plus minutes long, which was what I was kind of thinking. Anyways, in 2019, an independent people's tribunal in London confirmed that the regime had carried out forced organ harvesting on a significant scale, that imprisoned Falun Gong practitioners were probably the principal source. He Lifeng, a 45-year-old Falun Gong practitioner of Qiangdao, a city in Shandong province, I can at least pronounce that one, died after being detained for 2 months. His relatives said there were incisions on his chest and back. I wonder how many lungs they took. His face looked as if it was in pain, and there were wounds all over his body, according to Minghu.org, a website that serves as a clearinghouse for accounts of the persecution of the Falun Gong. And then, last but not least, the concentration camps that are still going on in the year of 2021. To maintain the rule, the CCP regime transferred a large number of Han ethnic people to Tibet, Xinjiang, and Inner Mongolia, where ethnic groups live in their own cultures and language. The regime forced local schools to use Mandarin Chinese as the official language. In 2008, Tibetans protested to express their anger at the regime's control. The regime, in response, delayed the police. Hundreds of Tibetans were killed. Since 2009, more than 150 Tibetans have self-immolated, hoping their deaths might stop the regime's tight control in Tibet. In Xinjiang, the regime's authorities have been accused of committing genocide against Uyghurs and other ethnic minorities, including detaining 1 million people in secretive political re-education camps. I've gone into a whole bunch of detail in one of my much earlier videos. It's about 8 months old at this time. I'll link to it somewhere. It'll be in one of those fucking eye icons on here, but you guys can just search for it if you're on Rumble or Odyssey as well. It should be up there, but that one's at least still kicking around for some of my older catalog rather. But yeah, that's a not quite extensive, but still hits all the major points of the CCP, and it's an evil regime. And it has its tendrils all across the world. Just check the Belt and Road policy, okay? Silk Road policy. They're trying to take over at a soft level. Now, there's a lot of cracks within its own system. It can barely take care of its own infrastructure, and they're just a couple of natural disasters away of just being a third world shithole, and it's very, very unstable at the top. Outside of Xi Jinping and his small group of supporters, they don't quite have as much control as they're projecting out there. Perhaps they see that globalism is really trying to take over the entire world, and they just want to be at the head of that table. But that's what I think. I think it's important to also put this information out there because, like I said, in school, I didn't learn a whole hell of a lot about Chinese history. It's something that should have been taught, and I'd like to rectify that situation, even as little of a voice as I do have, but I still think it's important. With that said, guys, I thank you all very much for the gift of your time. I've been Don Consuelo. I want you to follow your gut and get after it. Catch y'all later.